Robin Zander, scene A1.
Hello and welcome back to Snafu. I'm Robin Zander, and each week I sit down with authors, entrepreneurs, and executives to talk about non-sales selling. Today's episode is a little bit different. This is an hour-long webinar that I gave in front of about 100 people on Zoom for a global community called Sidebar about how to sell yourself. So instead of sitting down for an interview, this is me talking about non-sales selling and specifically the art of self-promotion to a group of professionals. These are people in the middle of career transitions. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, freelancers, and product people in the audience. We have a lot of Q&A at the end, and I hope you enjoy this webinar that I've given on how to sell yourself. And welcome everyone new who is joining us. We got 41 people here. Welcome everyone to be on video if you can. We'd love to see faces.
And then if you're just joining, I think our prompt this morning, which we would love to hear from a few of you, is just what's your biggest fear around selling yourself? Be great to to hear some perspectives and get some be vulnerable this morning. And I know Robin might tailor some of his talk
100%.
to some of the points that are being shared this morning.
Being intimidated with follow-up questions, Mia. Selling has always felt like a bad word, something nefarious, right? I think of the word manipulation to describe that.
Yep. Yeah. Sales historically is just like, yeah, it's a little bit icky. I don't want to talk to salespeople, right? It feels icky. And yeah.
I'm literally muting my phone right now because I'm getting a spam call, right?
Actually,
Yeah.
by the way, here's my hack. So I actually now do a lot of sales, but I've given myself my own label and it's chief evangelist, which is I'm not selling, I'm like sharing with the world, products and services that I passionately like believe in, so excited about, like scream from the top of the mountains. So the
Yeah.
rebranding of sales might actually be a hack.
I'll get into a little bit of my backstory eventually, but I worked in gyms as a personal trainer for a couple of years, and we always used to call it enrollment, right? Are you enrolling new members? So if a redefinition of the word, and that's why we're talking about selling yourself, right? It's not like, okay, what's your quota? And here's the pressure to go sell on behalf of a company. But instead, right, how do you define this set of tools for yourself to be successful in your own right?
That's great. Yeah, no, and Robin, and we're part of a Sidebar call here, but Sidebar is a paid membership community. But yeah, I mean, we talk about members joining our community, right? So we're not selling anybody. It's like they're getting something amazing of value, and they're joining a really go-giver, warm, welcoming, and vulnerable community. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. That was great. One or two more. Anybody want to either be bold and come off mute, or if you're not so bold, you can certainly put into the chat, and Robin's monitoring the chat.
Hey, Ha, I think one of the things is like the law of large numbers, right? When you're selling, it's just how large of the number does it have to be? If you're constantly selling, when is it gonna finally hit
Mm,
or produce something? That's like a big fear, I think, with a lot of sales folks.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah is one of my favorite people. And she's quite good at it. So we can all learn a few
You're
things
so
from Sarah.
kind. I feel
Um,
like I fail daily, but thank you.
Well, we all feel that way, but yeah, so so certainly sales is certainly a numbers game, right? You got to generate like a big enough pipeline, and not everybody's going to convert. So there is like the math and the conversion, but then at some point, does the top of the funnel dry up? That's great. Thank you for sharing. I have a lot of perspectives, but I want to hear Robin, so I won't share the perspectives now. But anybody else, like last person, I want to hear from one more person.
TD asks, is this a talk about sales? It's interesting, right? Because I think we were positioning it as how to sell yourself, right? I think about it in terms of self-promotion. But in many ways, I actually think, at least for me in my career, I've found promoting myself is the hardest version of selling. It's much easier to sell my incredible Squarespace web developer friend Evan on why, if you need a website, you should hire Evan than it is to promote myself. So I would say to TD, less a conversation about sales, certainly not classic sales quota. I'll just use the gender stereotype salesman, right? But actually self promotion, speaking up, asking for what we want.
Oh, Robin. Okay, first of all, I also have a hack there. So for those of you who don't know, I have a fractional consulting practice. So I brand myself a fractional COO, but I have a business partner and we are 50-50 business partners. We split all revenue and expenses 50-50. But anytime I meet somebody, I don't sell myself. I sell my
So my
business
partner,
partner.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm like, but I don't have any capacity, but Garrett is amazing. You absolutely have to meet him. You're gonna love him. So that's my hack.
Yep,
Anyways,
100%.
okay, with that, so I'm going to share the story of how I met Robin. I'm a community builder as well. So I have many labels. I'm a community builder. I hosted, was it December, a dinner at my home. I think it was 17 people at my home. And my hack in terms of like building my network is to host events. And I love meeting new people. And how do you expand beyond your network? Well, I invite co-hosts. And one of my co-host friends, Jesse Freezy, invited Robin. And occasionally at these dinner parties, I always meet some really, really interesting people that I absolutely must follow up with. So I can't remember if Robin reached out to me or if I reached out to him, but we connected and we share a lot of things in common. In fact, Robin invited me to speak at his upcoming conference, and it's called Snafu for the reluctant salespeople and all of us. And then I will probably not only just invite him here to speak to us today, but in future events and gatherings and conferences that I'm doing. Robin has his own media company. Before that, he was a cafe owner, and he's a community builder, and he's a lot more labels. But I'm going to turn over to Robin to introduce himself, share his story, and we're going to learn a ton from him today. I'm so excited about the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. 93 of us currently in the room. As I go through and as we talk, this is interactive. I've got a bunch of exercises for us to try. We're going to spend the last 15 or 20 minutes doing questions. I love that we're kicking off early, right? Like we're, already in it and in the weeds, and we're just a couple of minutes in. As you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or even interrupt me. As Ha said, my name's Robin Zander. I'm not going to go through the fullness of my backstory because it takes a while. And there's a whole conversation we could have about storytelling for another time of like, what are the stories that we tell to promote ourselves rather than just the totality of our story. But I'm going to share one very specific, speaking of AHA talking about being community builders. I've run a conference, not the Snafu conference, a different conference about the future of work called Responsive since 2016. It's a 2-day event that happens every September on the future of work. I came into that as somebody who was very much a professional dilettante, worked in a lot of different industries, and the focus of the conference is on building resilience in organizations. What are the tools, what are the structures, and what are the company cultures that make for resilient organizations? And then over the last couple of years, as we've seen just this insane rapid rate of change of technology and the ways we work and the ways we live changing so rapidly, a question that has continued to come up through running that conference is, what about resilience in people? What are the traits that we need in our careers and in our lives, in our personal relationships, and especially in our professional relationships to stay resilient to this change? I'm not here as the world's leading foremost expert on self-promotion or self-advocacy or certainly selling, right? I would at best label myself a reluctant salesperson. I think in like maybe 2010, Tim Ferriss won the greatest self-promoter of the world from, I think it was Fortune magazine. And I think that's like a backhanded compliment. So I actually don't come here with these are answers so much as in the last couple of years, something that I am very good at doing is asking people questions, is sitting down and having very honest conversations about how do we foster these traits that keep us resilient in this world that we're living through right now. And what I've heard again and again is in business and perhaps even in life, there's kind of two buckets of things that matter. One is operational excellence. You've got to be at least as good as the other person. I see Han nodding as an operator. And the other is promotion, enrollment, sales, standing up and saying, this is what I want, or building, as the Sidebar community does, coalitions of people who, to quote Seth Godin, say, people like us do things like this. We get together to learn. So 2 years ago, I started interviewing people about this idea of influence and persuasion. I started a weekly newsletter as a hub for me to share my learnings. I'm dropping it in the chat. It's called Snafu. It comes out every week. It's written by me by hand, not AI. And it's really just my own lessons learned from my life and from other people's lives throughout history and to, people I meet on the street about self-promotion, about the resilience that comes when we raise our hand and say, I think I have something to offer. What if I took that step forward? What if I was courageous? And I've come to learn there's a lot of different characteristics that make up this idea of how do we sell ourselves, right? There is how do we connect with another person? There's the art of connection. There's, to quote Amanda Palmer, she has a great book and a TED Talk that came out, I think, 10 years ago, the art of asking, right? I actually diametrically oppose always be closing, that classic sales trope, with actually just ask. Just have the courage to stand up and ask for what you want. Or my work today mostly is for very large companies. We do storytelling. We help big companies in the world, Boom Supersonic, Airbnb, Zappos, and others, figure out what their story is and then turn it into commercials that they can use. So how do we tell our stories as individuals? The stories of our career, the stories of our company, the stories of lessons learned so that we can get that promotion, right? To build the coalition that propels us towards our next step. But today, I actually want to talk about a different element of self-promotion, of how do we sell ourselves. And it's the one that in my career and in people that I talk to, that I look up to as the most successful, in my view, makes the biggest difference between sleazy, slimy salespeople and those of us who want to stand up for ourselves, ask for what we want, and not feel bad when we're doing so. And so that is service. That's showing up from a place of helping the other person and through the process also helping ourselves. I want to go back all the way to Robin. I'm turning 40 in June, so Robin at 5 years old. I was really fortunate, and I'm going to just be giving him credit for the rest of my life. My father took me out into the yard, and we had just dug up a small bed of soil, and he had me plant pumpkin seeds. And he didn't really tell me what we were doing, but I'd much rather go play with my friends down the street. And he was like, no, we are planting pumpkin seeds. And then all summer long, sometimes in tears because it was hard work under the hot sun, weeding the pumpkin seeds, watching these plants grow, making sure they didn't get overrun by weeds, until in August and September, I had pumpkins. And he took me outside and we harvested the pumpkins and we set them up on the street with a little red tin box. I'll never forget cutting the slit in the little red tin box. And he said, just, say money, a little sign that says money, and have labels on the pumpkins. And neighbors would come and buy the pumpkins and leave cash. We made a sign that said Robin's Pumpkin Patch, and we did this for 5-7 years. If you've read Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, you remember that scene where they persuade other people to paint the fence. They get a job painting the fence and then persuade other people to paint the fence in their stead. I persuaded all the neighborhood kids as a fun game to dress up in scarecrow costumes. So full white face, tiny slits for eyes. You couldn't see any skin. We had hay coming out of the hands, and hands were covered in gloves. And one of the boys would stand on the street corner, and when a car would come by, we would just make moving gestures, and cars would roll down their window and come in is this a robot? Why is this moving? And then when a car would go down the street following the pointed sign of the scarecrow boy, I would run out and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Robin. This is Robin's Pumpkin Patch. Would you like to buy a pumpkin for Halloween? You're going to get a Halloween pumpkin anyway. You should get them from us. We grew them ourselves." And I'd create this whole enthusiastic story. But the thing that I learned then, and I've never felt more wealthy in my entire life than when, like, at 5 years old, 6 years old, I had $50 from pumpkins that I had grown and sold. But it was a place of enthusiastic service. I was truly being my authentic, enthusiastic self. I wasn't trying to pitch people on anything. I wasn't trying to persuade them to do anything that they didn't want to do. I was helping people do something they were going to do anyway. They were going to get pumpkins somewhere. And they were so excited to support the local neighborhood boy who so cutely was pitching pumpkins. And so for me, when I've looked at my career and I've looked at things that have worked and things that haven't, the idea of coming to a self-promoting place, coming to asking for a raise or trying to persuade an enterprise to buy from Zander Media and not another company, if I can do it from that same childlike enthusiasm, that same place of delight, and that's what it is for me. So I want to spend 2 minutes, and I'll set a timer and have you drop your notes into the chat, and feel free to speak up too if you prefer that. But what is your authentic attitude that when you're doing self-promotion, right, when you are at your very best, you're not sleep deprived, you're not overwhelmed, but you are, and it could be from your childhood, it can be in your adult life, but it's the opposite of fear, right? Because it's different for every person. Mine is enthusiasm, and my question is, what's yours? So I'm gonna set a timer. We won't go more than 2 minutes. As you have that idea, just drop it into the chat. I'll read some out. Curiosity. Yeah. Passion. Yep. Ramsey says passion. Inspiration. Service to others. Observation. Possibility. Insight, value, helping other people. Creative, or maybe creativity. Belief in serendipity. Optimism. Yeah, I love that. Having a sense of what's possible. You can keep dropping those in. What I want to highlight with that story and with this open-mindedness worth, this exercise, is that there are two versions of self-promotion. And it's not quite that simple, but it certainly feels like it for me. I'm either living in a place where I am promoting myself, or I'm promoting a product, or I'm promoting Evan, my web developer guy that I mentioned earlier, from a place of delight, enthusiasm, true service, or I am doing it from a place of need. And so the next story and leading into the next exercise is, it was probably flash forward 15 years, right? I was about 20 when I moved to San Francisco. And one of my first jobs out of college was as a personal trainer working in gyms. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked in gyms or been around gym culture. They are a very sales-heavy environment. Everyone starts, and I was fully in this camp too, of becoming a personal trainer or getting involved in gyms because I liked fitness and I wanted to help people. And then very quickly you learn that gyms are an environment where personal trainers are incentivized in every conceivable way to get people to work with them as a personal trainer. And so I was working in Potrero in San Francisco at a gym called World's Gym. It was a bodybuilder's gym, and I was teaching Pilates. It was a very weird environment. It was my first job out of college. And I was trying really hard to sell clients. And within about 2 weeks, the owner of the gym sat me down and he said, you've got no clients. We're spending money on you. You're taking potential clients away from other people who are better at selling. Either have some new clients by the end of the week. I think it was a Wednesday. And he was like, by Friday, end of day, or you're fired. And I just froze up, right? I tried to. I'm sure I approached a couple of people. I spent a lot of time walking the floor and talking to people, but I just had that needy quality of like, I am so desperate. I'm so afraid of getting fired. And lo and behold, on Friday, I got fired. I walked out and, never came back. We've all experienced selling ourselves, promoting ourselves, asking for a raise, asking for a date from a place of need. And it feels gross when I do it. And it certainly feels gross when that spam caller was trying to call me when they're calling from that place of need. And so what's really funny for me in my career is then a couple of weeks later, I was walking down Valencia in San Francisco, and I saw a guy who was holding his back in pain, kind of leaning against the side of the street. And I approached him and I was like, you look like you're in pain. I'm a former athlete. I've had a back injury. I might be able to help. What's going on? And very quickly, it turned out he was needing help. He was wanting some support and he wanted some personal training, right? I ended up working with him for the next 3 years. The next client I met was a world famous photographer named Michael Light. I met him in the locker room of the UCSF swimming pool where I had been swimming. And he asked, what do you do? And I said, I'm a personal trainer, having one client and having just been fired from a gym. And he was like, oh, well, I'm looking for a personal trainer. Tell me about your work, right? And it came from this true desire to connect to another person. And so that dichotomy of feeling slimy, feeling salesy, feeling pushy, feeling like my efforts to self-promote, right, actually resulted in me freezing up versus literally just walking through the world and landing clients who I worked with those clients for 3 years, right? 3 times a week. It was good money, but more importantly, it was from a place of service and they felt that. And so the next exercise that I want you to try is, when is one time that you were trying to sell yourself or something important to you where you felt slimy? And what were you doing? And when is one time that you felt good? And what were you doing differently? I'm going to drop that in. We're going to just take another 2 minutes. You can speak up if you want, or you can just drop it into the chat. But when is one time that you were self-promoting that you felt slimy? And when is one time that you felt good? I'm seeing Rod, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, I apologize, saying, as a UCSF grad and former SF resident, I love this story. The pool at UCSF is absolutely beautiful, or was when I was there. When is one time that you stood up to promote yourself and froze? And I actually think that for me, that personal training example, I'm really fortunate that I've never had any success from trying to push, right? Had I closed clients by being a pushy gym salesman, right? Maybe I would have learned a different lesson. But instead, I learned that actually it didn't work for me and it felt terrible no matter what. Cool. These are coming in. Slimy, interviewing for a job where I knew layoffs were coming, giving off desperate energy. Yeah, desperate energy is a good way to describe it. I felt good when I was offering services out of care and love rather than looking for ROI. Slimy, if it felt inauthentic or performative. Slimy, job interviews good while showing my junior high kid what impact do I bring to the US economy serving SMB payments. Really nice. I'd encourage folks to get very specific. Slimy when selling for P&L at a hyperscaler. Yeah, absolutely. And if we can tap into the energy of what are we doing when we don't feel slimy and still ask for that raise, still ask for that job, still ask for that work, it's a very different place of self-promotion. It feels slimy when, that was my 2-minute alarm, it feels slimy when a sales email gets ghosted, to be honest. Nice, interesting, Kay. We can talk about that. Slimy selling when less knowledgeable about something for an organization. Felt good when I knew my services, add value, and solve a challenge. Yeah, really nice. Slimy when I don't see clear benefit to the other person, better when I know what they need. Really nice. Yeah, 100%. I agree, Liz. Slimy selling computers and printers in the UK right after college. Yeah, so I'm seeing some, right? If I feel like I'm taking advantage of somebody, I feel slimy and it feels bad, right? But if I really truly know, like the back of my hand, the value that I'm bringing to somebody, that's a very different thing. Feeling good having conversations to genuinely help solve problems, share information. I don't know if you remember Miracle on 34th Street. It's an old movie now. And I don't mean the colored one. I mean the one that came out like way before that. There's a Santa Claus who is working at a Macy's department store, which ages it right then. Um, I don't even know if Macy's is still in business. And he gets hired by the Macy's manager to sit and hold kids on his lap and give out candy canes. But actually the reason he's really hired by Macy's is to persuade the parents of those kids to buy a very specific item from the Macy's store. And instead, what the Santa Claus does is send them across the street to the competing department store. And the manager of the Macy's gets absolutely furious because Santa Claus is sending them to the competitor until within, days, and in my experience, it tends to take months and years, not days, but I see it again and again. The customers who were so well served by getting exactly what they wanted by the Santa Claus come back and start raving and praising the Macy's department store manager for having been so well served that they come back and say, okay, I'm a diehard fan of this Macy's. I'm never shopping anywhere else, right? When we are providing real value, and that can be value of, is what I'm offering good for the person I'm talking to or not? Right? And if it's not, sending them somewhere else. But if I am providing real value and providing it to enough people, invariably, that value comes back in return. You put enough bread across the water, eventually good things come back to you. Dai says, +1 growth learning significantly impact slimy versus good. Slimy when I know what the audience expects and is there to judge rather than be curious, and I struggle to cater to them. Good when I give the gift of knowledge. Yeah, I like gift, right? Gift of knowledge, gift of service. Pavir says, thanks for the reference. So true. One of the last examples that I want to give is really a turning point in my professional life, right? I've worked in more industries than most people. Right. Robin's Pumpkin Patch, personal trainer. I was a professional circus performer. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you want. But in 2016, I opened up a cafe and restaurant in the Mission District in San Francisco. It's still around today. I don't own it anymore. It's called Robin's Cafe. I didn't have any restaurant experience other than bussing tables in college, and I opened it in 3 weeks, which is a whole story. But over the 3 years that I ran Robin's Cafe, and particularly the hurdle of no restaurant experience, 3 weeks, and at the end of 3 weeks, serving food and coffee and tea and full meals to hundreds of customers a day, we eventually grew it to about 15 employees before I sold it in 2018. The courage to start the cafe and the conviction to keep running the cafe came because I knew so clearly who I was in service to. And Pavir says, amazing how many careers and professions have you had? I get lost in the 20s or 30s. We can talk about it one-on-one sometime. But in running Robin's Cafe, I knew it wasn't a blind leap. I lived in Mission Potrero for 10 years. I am a self-taught dancer, ballet and acrobatics and other things, and Robin's Cafe to this day is housed within ODC, which is a 40-year-old nonprofit dance center in the Mission that owns real estate. 2016 was an era in the Mission in San Francisco of the real rise of a neighborhood that was previously kind of a backwater neighborhood and was becoming this new gentrified, really changing and evolving landscape. When I started Robin's Cafe, catty corner to the cafe was a parking lot with all sorts of prostitution and drugs. And it was a rough neighborhood. And when I sold the cafe 3 years later, it was and still is an incredible kids playground, right? And so I had this intuition that this little dark corner had the potential to serve a community that was changing. And so what I did in the 3 weeks leading up to, as we were considering, I had to raise $40,000 to buy the assets in order to figure out how to run the cafe. I talked to lots and lots of chefs and restaurateurs across San Francisco, and I made a list of the people I was serving, right? So I didn't have any employees at the time. On day one, I think we had 2 employees. But okay, my employees. I want to deliberately create Robin's Cafe as a great place to work for my employees. Okay, great. Number 2, investors. $40,000 in $10,000 increments from family and friends. I had never raised money before. And so just going to people and saying, hey, I have this idea. I think it really, really could work. And here's why, but I don't know. Could I borrow money from you in order to try and make this work? Like, can we talk about it, right? I had to practice that, but I had to come with the conviction. And of course, if someone's going to loan me money, I need to create the case where if they invest in the business, of course, they get free food and beverage for life, but also that they get a return on their investment. Okay, what else? My landlords, right? ODC. ODC owns 2 pieces of real estate on that block on Shotwell in the Mission. And they were invested in the success of the business, right? They wanted their dancers, their students, their dance parents, their instructors, their neighbors on the street to all have a place to come and eat and to spend time together, right? To gather. Okay, my customers, right? The cafe serves all sorts of different people, right? From the tech companies that were moving into that neighborhood to the 12-year-olds who were coming to take dance class for the first time. So a successful business has to serve its customers, right? And then me. Of course, ideally, financially, right? If I'm going to stay in business, I have to be able to pay myself at least something. But also for me, it was my MBA. It was, I'm going to try this and see if I can make this work. And if it all goes to hell and it fails miserably, at least it's been an incredible learning journey. And when things got rough, which they often did, right? There was a homeless encampment down the street. We had break-ins, we had flooding, we had, competition, we had city permitting. I've never pulled a more difficult permit than outdoor tables and chairs from the city and county of San Francisco in 2016, right? All of the challenges were from this place of all of these people that I'm serving, all of these different groups of people, and coming to them from a place of service. I gave a book, Danny Meyer's Setting the Table. Danny Meyer is the founder of Shake Shack, the Union Square Hospitality Group, famously Union Square Cafe. I see some folks know. I gave Setting the Table, which is truly a book about selling and about service, to every single employee, right? We probably hired 150 employees across the years of the cafe. On their first day and said, read this book, right? We want to create a place of service, as Ha said, a place of go-givers where we are giving in order to get paid. And so at the cafe, I served employees, investors, our landlord, all of these different types of customers, and me, right? And so I want to spend another couple of minutes, call it 2-3 minutes, listing out in your own business or your desire to get a promotion or your next career step, who are as many different types of people that you serve, right? And so, okay, your spouse benefits. Tell me more, right? And my dog is snoring in the background. Does my dog benefit? I've never had that thought before, right? What about my kids? What about my manager? What about the people that I'm bringing with me in my career? What about people who look to me for advice and I have this story to tell? List out as many different types of people who benefit from you being of service, from your success as possible. Just setting a timer here for 2 minutes. As I've gone on post Robin's Cafe, I tried to do this several times a year, no matter what I'm running, right? I've been doing this now with this new Snafu conference, this one-day conference on how to sell yourself that Ha is speaking at in early March. Actually, we're exactly 1 month away, right? When we list out all of the different reasons, right? And for me, one of those reasons always has to be I'm learning, right? If I'm going to do anything, it has to come from a place of that's a driver for me, right? That can be for you. Some people that's money, some people that's acclaim, some people that's admiration of a partner, or right, working for a purpose-driven company. Drop into the chat, if you will, as many different types of audiences, types of groups of people, personas that benefit from you speaking up. For Sidebar, Ha says, our members, our facilitators, our employees, our CEO, our board, our broader audience. 100%. Right? And so then when things get tough, when things are rough, when I am inclined to sell from a place not of service, but of sleazy, needy, clinging, clawy, right? Recognizing those people. Coworkers, bosses, clients, society as a whole, users, says Elizabeth. Family, my manager, company, team, peers, community like LinkedIn, and customers. Yeah, 100%. My kids, my husband, my clients, their spouses, nice, their extended family. Yeah, potential generational. 100%. I was homeschooled in 7th grade, and I went on a hike last year with my homeschooling instructor, who I hadn't talked to in, 30 years, right? 25 years, Paul Judge. And he was so inspired. He was like, these are the reasons why I became a teacher, is to, you did what? Like, you performed with the San Francisco Opera as an acrobat? I've never heard of somebody doing that, right? And I never thought that I was in service with the cafe or with my career in the circus for Paul. But Paul is a persona that I can summon, that when things are rough, I can say, I am showing up in service. I am promoting myself so that this person who mentored me when I was a kid is, did that hard work. My clients, their customers, my fellow independent professionals. That's a really fun category, 100%. Mentees I mentored in several arenas. Yeah, 100%. Women, cancer patients, leaders, managers, company, community, South Asian women. I think that the more specific we get, right, the more useful it is for us, particularly when things are tough. And when we truly show up from a place of service, when we truly come to asking for a raise, or asking if someone would like to become our client, or, applying for a new job from a place of, is this in service to the person I'm talking to? And does it serve as many multiple stakeholders as possible? Right? Then selling yourself is easy.
Hey, Robin, can you just elaborate a little bit more on that? Especially around asking for promotion. So can you talk about that and tying that into being in service, like a little bit more concretely?
Sure. Yeah, totally. Can we choose an example? I mean, do you have an example, from your
No,
career?
I mean, just well, because every time I think about like asking for promotion, and I've done that multiple times, and it's only ever served me in my career, by the way, only ever served me. But I always think about it as being in service to myself, which is like, advocating for what I believed in, which was I was already doing the role and I should be rewarded for it. But I just wasn't sure if there was like to think about it any differently other than being in service to myself.
Sure, totally. So when you are asking for a promotion, do you have people that you are mentoring?
Of course, yeah. I
Right.
was the
And
manager, yeah.
maybe specifically, do you have women under you who you are
Mhm.
mentoring, even as you're
Yep.
asking for a promotion? And so in asking for a promotion, you're modeling to those women that you mentor that this is what it looks like to ask, right? There's a case to be made that your organization is served by you having more power in that organization, right? That
Mhm.
organization will be more successful as a result of, and knowing you, I think that's true, holding that position of authority, right? Having a different title, people in the organization will treat you and your good ideas more seriously, right? If you're the intern, right? they're a whole lot less likely to treat you with respect than if you are the COO. It gives you stories to use with other clients, right? It gives you for your boys, right? For your kids. You're like, this is what it was like when I asked for a promotion. Yes, it's scary, but I showed up from a place of service, of go-giving, right? I'm just looking at this chat here. Yeah, other examples tied into we can double down on promotion if that's useful, or additional thoughts there, huh?
But that was just super helpful. So yeah, to this day, right? I get asked to speak a lot, or I'm in podcasts, and the topic that always comes up is using your voice. And the example that I like to give is actually two examples. One is the first time asking my boss for promotion because I wanted to be a manager. And then the second time was when I was a director and I felt like I deserved the VP title. But what the ask and then the immediate resulting outcome of that ask did for the trajectory of my career. And so now, like, being in service, I tell everybody, you just have to ask for what you want. Like, my career would look very differently if I didn't ask. And I just assumed that people like would know to promote me because I was doing a good job. Like, you just can't assume anything.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that idea of courage, right? Courage by definition is doing things despite fear. It's not being fearless, right? You don't display courage when you are fearless. When we are hesitant to speak up, when we're hesitant to ask for the raise and take the step towards doing so anyway, right? Courage is a whole topic that we can dig into, and right, there's a lot of very interesting science on it, right? The key, I think, to courage is to take small steps, right? And to do a little tiny bit of step towards the thing that you're afraid of, even though you're afraid of it, right? And not what I would historically do and what sounds like, maybe it does less is stop ourselves from asking, right? Kay is asking, I'd love to know how to remain confident in promotions when you're not getting your desired results yet or when to pivot, right? There's almost no amount of non-response from an email. If someone has said, I'd like to hear from you, I'm going to send them 17 email over the course of 17 months, unless they respond back and say, please don't contact me anymore, right? I might then, send a LinkedIn message or send a text or call them or check in with a friend and make sure they didn't get hit by a car, right? But that comes from the practice of doing the work, not avoiding it, right? It comes from, how many times have you asked for a raise in your career, huh?
Well, those two examples specifically, other times I just got it, But I will say that, like, in my fractional consulting practice, right? Like, you don't get what you don't ask for, and so yeah, and so I think it's served me really, really, really well. Um, and then honestly, I actually have an attitude of like, if they say no, it is their loss. I mean, come on, you could be working with me and you decided that it didn't make sense. Like, that's your loss. Um, so anyway, so that,
Yeah.
Can I chime in quickly? Just one
yeah, yeah,
minute. Yeah, this is
yeah,
Marianne. I love the topic of promotion and asking
yeah.
because also early in my career, I was not comfortable to ask for more money, promotion. And
Mm,
what I've learned is that in general, women and underrepresented minority don't ask. So it was
right.
actually for me a getting out of my comfort zone, right? I was not raised in a culture where you ask. I thought it has to be given to you. So I agree with you, Robin, this aspect of how do we model to the younger people, to the next generation. And that's what I do. Sometimes it's even just to model, to be able to teach my own daughter that guess what? There's more money on the table. As you do the work, you need to ask for it. So I just wanted to add the part that women and minority actually are not asking. And how do we change that mentality? Because I was not raised like that. So I had to get out of my comfort zone. For me, this is like really modeling for my daughter, for the younger generation.
Right. Yeah. Another way that I think of being of service is I was a really shy boy. I grew up in a very rural town where I was beat up every day in middle school. I grew up not asking. I grew up not, right? And I'm a white man in America. I have all the privilege in the world. I was afraid to ask, right? And I look around at the world, and some of the voices that are the most bullying, some of the voices that are the most nasty don't look like they have any problem asking, right? And yet, okay, it is women, right? It is people who are shy, it is people who are hesitant to speak up who maybe do. And so, in practicing asking, in practicing promoting myself, in practicing saying, this is what I have to offer, are you interested? Not buy it, but would you like to learn more? I am taking a radical stance against bullying, against angry voices that are only interested in controversy, right? Against, your daughter who might otherwise practice not speaking up for herself. And so you're modeling for her that this is how to do it. I really
By the
love
way, I
that.
was just recently listening to a 20 VC podcast by Harry Stebbings. And he was talking about how he got uh, uh, the Salesforce CEO. His name is slipping my mind, but who's the but
Benioff.
thank you, Benioff, Mark Benioff, onto his podcast. He emailed Mark cold 53 times, 53 times before Mark said yes. But I'm like, man, that guy has, the kahunas to like ask 53 times because what happens even when we ask once, and maybe the most bold among us, like, will send the follow-up nudge and then we quit, we stop,
Yep.
and we never then really truly get what we want because then we turn inward and just say like, oh, they must not be interested, I'm not going to ask. But busy people require just, like both the nudges, but then also um, understanding that you're serious and that, so you're serious enough that maybe they'll one day say yes. So that was the learning. I was very inspired by that podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me, one of our speakers at the Snafu conference in March is Eric Bahn, the co-founder of Hustle Fund, which is a VC firm in early stage startup land. And I've heard him give workshops in the past or a talk on his process of raising money, right? When they were raising their first fund, they were raising from anybody and everybody, his dentist, right? And he has a very specific protocol of how many times he's willing to follow up with somebody unless he hears a no, right? And so it's super respectful and it's completely unapologetic in the follow ups, in the systemization of something that historically I would be really hesitant to even follow up, as you say, the second time. I want to switch into Q&A, but just a couple of recommendations before we do so. So I mentioned Danny Meyer Setting the Table. Another book on service that really is a book about sales is, I have it right here, Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality. Incredible two books, both from restaurants and from the world of hospitality, which of course is near and dear to my heart. And then also the Snafu newsletter, right? It comes out weekly. It's written by me, and it's on all of these topics on influence and persuasion in the modern world of work. So, however you want to do, we got 13 minutes
Well, I
left. What
saw
up to?
I saw Nooper's hand up first. So, Nooper, ask your question, but Robin, before you answer it, I'm going to throw up the QR code while you answer it so that people can share feedback on the session. So, Nooper, take it away.
Sure. Thanks. And Robin, this has been great. Your story is inspiring and the message spot on. I'll pick up on the last comment about asking and then being persistent with that ask. Oftentimes, when we're, especially when you're selling, long term, if you're selling something specific, oftentimes, it's about the time. You have to be at the right time in the right place.
Yep.
And you have to stay top of mind, and that's where you have to keep sending the message so that you stay top of mind, because when the time's right, they'll respond. What are your tricks, or how have you stayed persistent in that?
Totally.
Okay,
Yeah. I mean,
so Robin,
yeah,
before you
please.
answer, I'm gonna let you answer. I'm gonna be like Kanye. I'm gonna okay, so um everybody, while Robin is answering, I do want you to get out your phone, or if you don't have a phone, you can copy this bit.ly. But get out your phone, point it to the QR code. Three quick questions, which is, what did you like the most and what could have been improved, and any other speakers that you might want us to bring in, because the feedback is super valuable. And I share all this feedback back with Robin so that he can continue to improve, because I'm a big believer that feedback is a gift. And then if you do end up coming to his conference and hearing my version of the workshop and the talk, I want the same feedback too. So anyways, okay, with that, I'm gonna just keep this.
Sure.
If you're okay with that, I'm gonna keep this QR code up on the screen while you answer, Robin.
Great. Yeah, 100%. Feedback is essential. Thank you all. So relationship-based selling. We have somebody at the Snafu conference that I've spent some time with now who opened up Silicon Valley to Accenture. So he was a salesman at Accenture for 35 years. His name is Dan Kavanaugh. The book he recommended to me was The New Strategic Selling. And so Zander Media, my day job, we sell video production services into enterprise, right? Somewhere between like 10K projects and 150K projects. What I didn't know until reading the book and talking to Dan is there are like 17 different very technical names for all of the different stakeholders of a big enterprise sale, right? And I've not sold millions of dollar contracts, not to mention billions of dollar contracts like Dan did for 35 years. But the person who's signing an SOW is very different than the person who controls the budget, is very different than the person you have the first meeting with, is very different in turn from the person you're actually serving with your services as Accenture or Zander Media. And so what it highlighted for me, and what I've been thinking a lot about this year, is in a relationship-based sales environment, right? I worked in ed tech, has a incredibly long, right? One of the reasons educational technology companies that serve into academia are really difficult is because the sales cycle is really long. You have to know the tempo of the types of organizations you're selling into. You have to know the needs of all of the different people, right? And this is true if we're getting a promotion as well, right? Okay, your first recruiter is different from the future manager, is different from the politics of the team that you might be joining, right? And so as many connections and as many understandings of, and all of these systems are opaque, right? We don't know what, we're never going to know in advance of making a sale or getting a raise or joining a new company what all of these different stakeholders are. But as much as you can, the details of the specific organization and the people and the needs of those people you can recognize, the better you will be at accomplishing your goal.
Yep. No, spot on. And to your point, they're not just too many stakeholders, but they're also unique because it is about the people in the organization versus the standard structures and hierarchies.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I see Smriti's hand up. And then I'm gonna turn off the screen share. Hopefully everywhere got the QR code. Okay, so I'm gonna let Smriti ask the next
Thanks,
question.
Great discussion, Robin. Really inspiring. One question I have is very specific. Like nowadays, because of AI, we see a lot of people trying to sell their AI products with a feeling that, oh, if you will miss out, you will miss out. And sometimes I have fallen prey to that. And now when I am building my app, I am resisting that urge to sell it that way. So what are your thoughts and suggestions or advice in this?
Knowing exactly who you serve, right? And I think my biggest advice for building companies, at least in my experience, is nobody knew the customers of Robin's Cafe better than I did, right? I knew the names of all of the dance teachers at ODC. I knew all of the kids' parents who would come in and buy their kids croissants, right? And so there's a quality of, yeah, you can pray. I mean, I've bought things out of urgency too. I actually have a rule now with a salesperson. If they try to pressure me to sell, I'm going to say, hey, you're using pressure. I don't respond to pressure. Even if I sought you out and want what you're selling anyway, if you pressure me anymore, if I get a vibe of pressure from you in the future, I'm a hard no, even if I would have already been a yes, right? And so I take a very oppositional stance, right? And that rules out 70% of the salespeople, right? They're just like, okay, right? Sometimes they flip and sometimes they become much more caring and supportive. And that's the kind of salesperson that I want to work with, right? But if you're showing up with one very specific type of customer and promoting yourself, promoting your product, promoting your AI tool exactly to them, and it actually serves them You know who they are, you know what it is, you know your service or your product better than anybody else in the world, and you know the kinds of people that you're serving, right? Then it's not a sale. It's a like, hey, I went on a quest over the last 7 months to find a CRM that I really love. I wanted something that was enabled. I've tried Salesforce, I've tried Zoho, I've tried, HubSpot, I tried them all. And I finally found one that serves people like me, right? And does exactly, and I wanted it to be free with paid upgrades and right? And I'm like, okay, now, by the way, it's called clarify.ai. I love it. No affiliation. It's just been the thing that I need for my business and for tracking all of the contacts in my life. It's just a very efficient Rolodex. And so what is that solve? What is that need that you're solving for those customers, right? And and then it's not a sale, right? You don't need to pitch them on it. It's a like, hey, Robin, is that a pain point you have? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, you understand me. You understand me better than I understand myself. And you're like, well, I built the solution for that.
And, I'm going to add one more thing, which is, if there's a possibility of getting your existing customers to help you with the sale or the close, like that goes a long way, right? So like, so another founder I support, we run AI boot camps. We don't actually have to convince anybody because all of our participants who participate in the boot camp like loved it so much that they basically share it with all their friends, or if anybody has a question with the boot camp, I'm like, oh, go talk to this person who just took the boot camp, and you can find out about their experience, and so that helps a lot because then again you don't have to necessarily be the one that closes. Maybe introduce the service, but then maybe you have another customer close for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm seeing a couple of questions about the books that we mentioned. So Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, and The New Strategic Selling. There's others. I can drop in a list of books, or maybe when we follow up the email,
yeah.
I have, like the 10, the 10 to start.
Yeah.
And then a couple of questions about the conference. So I'm just seeing that in the chat. It's March 5th at the Oakland Museum of California. It's about influence and persuasion in the modern world of work, right? It's how, especially now, and I think it's always been true, that good ideas are no longer enough, and we actually have to speak up. We have to stand up for what we believe in. We've got a bunch of really incredible speakers. Of course, is going to be talking about community building and the utility of building coalitions of people to promote your thing, to help you, your company, your career. Gagan Biani, who's the co-founder of Udemy and now the edtech company Maven, is going to be coming on stage. I mentioned Eric Bond of Hustle Fund. Jeff Jaworski is a executive coach after 15 years as a sales executive and revenue leader at Google. So a bunch of Mandy Mooney is the VP of internal comms at Prologis, talking about building a corporate career and how to do things like get promotion. So it really is, it's the conference that I wish I could have attended 5-10 years ago, right? And there are so many conferences about sales for salespeople. There's not very many about this for the rest of us. I saw one other question about Snafu, why I chose that acronym. So Snafu is a World War II acronym. Pardon me, I'm going to drop an F-bomb. It actually means situation normal, all fucked up. But I also love that it has come to mean small misstep, small mistake, right? And so this idea of the learning process is a process of taking, 2 steps sideways, 1 step forward. But also we're living in chaotic times and we need to develop the skills to keep pace. I think we got time for 1 or 2 more questions,
Yeah, feel free to come off off mute and ask. Otherwise, we'll just end it a couple minutes early. And as Robin said, we'll send out the video, any of the resources, including the books that he is recommending, a link to the conference, which I will be at. I'm excited to attend as a participant, not just a workshop teacher to it. And it's not a very expensive ticket, actually. So so I'm looking forward to it, Robin. We're gonna have to have you back because this was so incredibly awesome.
I would love that.
So maybe we'll have you for our in-person Sidebar Spark conference, and that is Friday, April 17th, all Sidebar members have a free ticket. Their ticket is included. And for the rest of you, you might need to just contact me. So, anyways, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robin. This is amazing. This is an amazing hour and time well spent. And if folks want to contact you directly, what's the
Yeah,
best way?
absolutely. Yeah, the newsletter, and then I'm just dropping my email into the chat. It's robin@zandermedia.com. I'm not hard to find.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you everybody for spending the time with us. Thank you, Robin. And we'll be back soon.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye.